Dov, over to you. Dov, you can start.
Thanks for joining us. This is a very poignant moment for the family. Tonight is the Shloshim after the passing of our beloved father, grandfather, husband, of course. Nafla Ateres Roshainu, the crown of our family has fallen. The crown of my mom, the crown of all the children, the crown of the family, the Talmidim, the Kehilos. Nafla Ateres Roshainu, Oy me hayalanu. A splendor, a ziv, a hadar, a glory. He crowned us all. We basked in his covered, in his glory, in his goodness, in his wisdom. How many times did I hear Daddy say, Hareini kaparas mishkovoi? He said, the first mourner though, Kiviyachol, the one who's most bereft is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he used to say, when a good person, when a decent person leaves the world, the Shechina is Kiviyachol diminished. The presence of Hashem is diminished from the world. How much more so when a Talmid Chacham, a Yochid, of such stature, of such godness, of such goodness, who radiated Shechina to everyone in his presence. How much Shechina is lost? He would have said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is the first Avel. And that's why the shiur on the Avelim, on the children, on the Talmidim, part of our response, together with the grief, is to say, to declare, Yizgadeu v'yizkadesh. May Hashem's name be magnified and glorified. And Abba used to say that means we are attempting and we are pledging to somehow make up, to compensate. We can't complete it. There is no replacement. The Gemara says that Hashem says to the Jewish people, for the wood that they destroyed, I'll bring you metal. For the metal, I'll bring you copper. The copper, I'll bring you silver. Tachas hachesef, I'll bring you zahav. But Talmidei Chachamim that they destroyed, the martyred Talmidei Chachamim of the generations, ein lehem tzimura. There's no replacement. Each one is a yochid, can never be replaced. And at the same time, the Avedim say, our bakosha is we understand the loss and we commit to trying to somehow compensate. A good friend wrote to me a beautiful letter, and he mentioned the thought of the Pachad Yitzchak, where the Gemara says, Bro karo davua, the son, a child, is the legs, the feet of his father. That's what the Gemara says. The Pachad Yitzchak explains, what does it mean that you're the feet of the father, the legs of the father? It says that when the father is in Gan Eden, in the Olam HaEmes, together with the Malachim, the angels, there's no more forward motion. He can no longer do his own mitzvahs. And on that, the Gemara says, Bro, a child, karo davua, you can be his feet. Through you, he can walk from Rakia to Rakia. He goes from Beis Medrash to Beis Medrash through your learning, through your mitzvahs. And it's in this spirit that tonight on the Shloshim, we dedicate this Yeshiva al Kivra, this virtual Yeshiva, this virtual Beis Medrash of Torah, which is the traditional way of noting the passing of a Talmid Chacham, more Torah, and through that Torah somehow to generate a Yizgadel v'Yizkadesh, because that's the greatest Kaddish. That's the greatest Ner Neshama. Ner Neshama certainly brings delight and pleasure to the Neshama, as is written, but the Ikar is Torah. Torah, to light the lamp of the Torah. And tonight we have the Zechus to launch the new series of Pirkei Avos, Le'ilu Nishmas, and all the Torah will be Le'ilu Nishmas. Moreinu, Harav, Avraham, Chaim, Abba Mori, Areni Kabbalah Mishkavoy, Avraham Chaim Ben Eliezer Yaakov. I take a moment to pay tribute to Chaim, my sister Chaya, and Rabbi David for creating this yeshiva, this Beis Medrash of Avos, and they created it even in my father's lifetime. During the lockdown, he was able to disseminate his beautiful Torah in his inimitable way, in his inimitable, gentle, charming way, to so many hundreds and thousands of people. And it meant so much to him in that time to be able to give out. He was never a person who wanted to retire. He never wanted to stop teaching. As the Pasuk says, I heard him say this so many times, by Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah says, Umus Bahar. Hashem said to him, you're going to pass away on the mountain. And my father always said that means while you're still climbing, you're still fresh, you still have so much to give, not stale. And that so much captures how I saw Abba Mori at the end. He was physically weakened, we could see that, but he was so excited by the Torah that he was giving out. He was enjoying it so much. So a special tribute to Chaya and David for creating this platform. And it's appropriate because on Tuesday nights, my father used to give what was most probably, almost certainly, the longest standing Gemara shiur in town, in South Africa. Probably over 50 years, as far as my memory serves correctly. And that was every Tuesday night. And then that was replaced after the lockdown with his Pirkei Avos. And now, Be'ezat Hashem, it will become this shiur in his honor, this Torah in his honor. And at the same time, I need to mention that to my sister Chaya, Nechama, Baruch, Gaudi, Tziona, and all their families, all their beautiful families, who Ziedy loved so much and got so much nachas from. And may Hashem put comfort and strength into all our hearts. And to Chuni, his brother Chuni in America, he was so close to you also. May Hashem bless you with comfort and strength. Especially to my mom. You can't mention my father's name without mentioning Tibadel Chaim Toivim Arukim, my mother. Mom, you were not just his partner for 6 decades plus. You were his inspiration. He credited you with everything that he did. Dad became an Av. Tonight we're learning Avos. He became an Av. The primary force and source of Torah in South Africa. He credited you with it all. He said so often, I would be nothing without your mother. You gave him the inspiration to be great. You doted over him. You quelled, Mom, to watch you at the birthday parties that we enjoyed together, at the anniversaries. You quelled over every word that he said. His droshes, his shiurim, you loved. You were his biggest fan. Even when he told a joke, you laughed twice all the time. You laughed the moment you recognized which joke he was telling. You already laughed. And then you laughed when the Olam finally got it. And he also said that he only got his inspiration to become a chashuv Rov from your family, from seeing the gadlus, the nobility the leadership that your family played in America. Avraham Avinu was the first Av. He wasn't just the first Av, Avraham Avinu, not just because he was the greatest individual. As my father always said, he was the greatest philosopher ever and the greatest Baal Chesed, the nicest, kindest person ever. Together, they go together. That didn't make him an Av. He wasn't just an Av because he was born before the rest of us. That also didn't make him an Av. Hashem says, you know what? I love that man, Avraham Oihavi. I love him. And for this reason, he became an Av. The man Sheikh Yedati, I know him. Yetzave Esbanov was Achra. He's going to instruct the generations, his children, his Talmidim. He's going to turn them all into friends. He's going to turn them all into partners. And he's going to instruct them. He's going to create the future. He's taken responsibility for the future. He's got a vision for the future. And that's the key to this term called Avhus, being an Av, being a patriarch. Zikui Haravim, saying to Hashem, I'm here for your people. I work for Kol Yisroal, I work for the Rebbeinu Shalom. Another midah that we see by Avraham Avinu, Lo hirher acharai. Hashem says, I told him, Lech lecha, go to Eretz Yisrael. And I told you, I'm going to give you the whole land. And then when the time came to purchase a burial place for his wife Sarah, he had to buy it. And yet Avraham took it in stride. He didn't ask a question. He didn't say, but you said it's going to be different. Our father also, he was sent by his Rosh Yeshiva, Shluchim Pirkei. Go, you're going to be a Rosh Yeshiva. He came and he found, as we all know, it didn't look much like a yeshiva, and Johannesburg wasn't much like a Makom Torah. And he was a boy from Williamsburg, from Tells, a naive boy. But he didn't run back. He didn't ask a question. He said, if this is where the Rebbeinu Shalom has put me, this is where I start rolling up my sleeves, smiling, talking to people, teaching them Torah. One of his favorite wörtlich in the last few years was originally came from one of his Rosh Yeshiva, originally in Torah V'das, of Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz, who's regarded as the father of Torah in America, the father of the yeshivas. And he says, the pasuk says, Hashem says to Kol Yisroal, I remember the kindness that you did to me in your youth. What was the kindness? You followed me into the desert, into the wilderness. The Eretz Lo Zerua, uncultivated land. You were ready, Kol Yisroal said, Rebbeinu Shalom, Naaseh v'nishma, we're going to follow you into the Midbar. Uncharted. And Hashem said, that's special. That's a relationship. And Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelowitz commented on that. He says, if you read it slightly differently, it's not Eretz Lo Zerua, a land that is not yet cultivated. Rather, he said, Pshat is the Eretz, in the land where Lo Zerua. He said America was a place where it wasn't uncultivated. It was cultivated with an attitude that said, Loi. Over here, there won't be Torah, Chas v'Shalom. Over here, there won't be Yiddishkeit. Over here, they're not going to print Ketzois. As my father always said, over here, they're going to only make Machzorim. And my father was Zeiche. He and my mom came out to an Eretz Lo Zerua. It wasn't uncultivated. There was an attitude. But he didn't complain. He made it work. Together with Tibadel Chaim, his Rebbetzin, they started making Hachnosas Orchim. They started making friends, not congregants. And one by one, they changed the town. He remained faithful to his shlichus, admired by Gedolim, beloved by Gedolim. He taught that a Rav doesn't only teach Torah, he uplifts people. He uses his pulpit, he uses his kavod to uplift everyone. Like a master sculptor who sees an image, a likeness in a piece of stone, he had this vision when he looked at you, that he saw something that you didn't know exist. But he didn't chisel away. Unlike the sculptor, he did not chisel away at the person. He spoke to the rock, and the greatness emerged. It responded. He wasn't just crowned with every good midah, having a lot of good midahs. Rather, they were all merged together with this magnificent wisdom, this chokhmah, this knowing exactly how to blend it. And the truth is that every time I look at a Sefer Musar and I look at any idea of ethical behavior, of how to treat people, it just comes back to me, comes alive to me. This is what Ziedy was, this is what he said, this is what he taught. So Baruch Hashem, I'm privileged to say the first in this series of Pirkei Avos Be'ezat Hashem. Be'ezat Hashem, my sister Chaya and Rabbi David will be inviting many guests to share Pirkei Avos with us. But let's start. It's a great zechus to launch this shiur in his honor. The Gemara says that if a person wants to be a chassid, there are three opinions what he should do. If you want to be truly pious, how do you go about that? One says he should be particular in nezikin. Don't cause harm to anyone. Don't damage anyone. You better learn nezikin well and practice nezikin. The other one says, no, it's merely de brachas. You must practice your brachas. And the third one says, no, office. You must be particular in office. The Maharal explains that these three opinions are three different relationships that a human being has. The one who says it's nezikin, he says the key to piety is how you treat others. The one who says brachas says the key to goodness and piety is between you and Hashem, the way you recite your brachas. And the third one says, no, avos. A person who wants to aman de boile mehave chasida, he should be particular in Masechta avos. And the Maharal explains, what's avos? It's you. It's who you are. It's your mitzvahs. It's not just bein adam lechaveiro, and it's not just bein adam lemakom. Rather, what is it? I think perhaps that opinion, they're not arguing. He's saying that it's not enough just to not cause damage to people. It has to be because you see yourself as an elevated person. And even your brachas, mili deshmaya, it can't just be that you're ticking off those halachas. It's got to be because through avos, through this developing of yourself, an identity, a sense of self as an elevated human being, of tzelem elokim, which is what avos teaches us, it's through that the person can become a true chassid. That's where that's where it lies. Both of them are important. You can start with either one and we'll get to the other one if you're doing it through avos. The question that the Mefarshim deal with is, why is it called avos? This Masechta, why called avos? Call it musar, call it chovas halavavos, as the Rabbeinu Bachya calls it, hilchos deos, as the Rambam calls it, attitudes. Why avos? One of the answers is, avos, like in Shabbos and in Tumah, is a primary concept. So all the primary concepts of ethical behavior are to be found in this Masechta, in their most fundamental form. And everything that we know, all the other Sifrei Musa, can find a root in the avos. Those are all told us. But the avos, the primary characters, the primary refinement of the human being is to be found in avos. That's one pshat. There's another pshat, that avos, because when the sages taught proper behavior, a code of ethics, they weren't just teaching it to students. Rather, hamelamed is ben chaveiro, someone who teaches Torah to someone else's child, kilu yeladoi. They were forming him. So the teachers of ethical practice are considered avos. They become your father. And so many people have written and sent in letters and said to me, we feel like we lost our father. And there's a third pshat is that in fact every parent needs to learn Avos, because even though we're all told us, and only 3 were called Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but the truth is every parent has to be an Av to his children, and therefore he has to study Avos and to know Avos. It's appropriate that tonight we mention is also the Yortzeit of Rachel Imeinu, one of the Imahos who davened for the Yidden in the Galus. And to me, that the Shloshim should fall on the Yortzeit of one of the Imahos talks to me a lot about Avos. I think that my father was Zoche to become an Av for the community, a prime force in the spiritual development, in the Torah Chinuch of our community through his vision. Finally, there's another very important yesod. If you look at Avos, as we study it, Mishnah after Mishnah, it's not just a collection of halachas, how you should behave. Do this, don't do that. It's always opinions. Hillel Omer, Shammai Omer. Every Mishnah is Hu Haya Omer. In other words, it's not the study of ethics in Judaism, in Torah, is not the study of ethical concepts. It's the study of ethical people. No such thing as someone who has legal authority in Torah without moral authority. And therefore, we study the study of Midas is really, we study who the Amora is. And in that, we learn his Torah. And in fact, even in the Gemara, you see that all the time. Every halachic statement is who he said it, and ideally, who he said it in the name of 3 generations. It's not just to give us the authority of the person. That's certainly part of it. But there's something else going on. We're studying that Gadol. We're studying that personality. In studying great people, it's edifying. We become a little better ourselves. We develop role models. The study of Avos is a study of role models. One of the famous questions as we read Bereshis is, why does the Torah start with Bereshis and all the stories of the Avos? Why not start with the mitzvahs? Many answers are given. One of the great answers is that these stories are the Torah. That's the Torah. Then later on come the mitzvahs of the Torah, but they're not the Torah. Those are the mitzvahs of the Torah. The Etzem HaTorah is the study of the Avos, the study of the great people. That's the real Torah. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. Avos michlal de'ikat toldos, as the Gemara says. Avos, you become an Av when you put yourself aside. You see the other. You take responsibility for the development of the other. And that's who we come to honor tonight. He wasn't just concerned for himself, but for the doros. So this is the great study of Avos. And it's appropriate because we're talking about somebody who, together with Tibodel Chaim Zrebitzin, became Avos of our community. And he delighted in teaching this Masechta because he saw so much. There's endless fundamentals in it. It's worded by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who the Rambam says he knew the language and the concepts better than anyone in his time. And he locked up so many secrets in every Mishnah. Even after thousands of years of commentary, you still feel there's still more locked up. He locked up more. But we take out what we can take out. It's the study of Mishnah, but it's the study of people and attitudes. And that's how we grow. The introduction that I've been tasked to learn tonight, and if you have the text in front of you, you see, is Kol Yisroal yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba. All Jewish people, Kol Yisroal yesh lahem chelek, have a share in the world to come. And we learn it from a pasuk. V'amech, in Yeshayahu, in Isaiah, the pasuk says, V'amech kulam tzadikim, all your people are righteous. Le'olam yirshu aretz, they will inherit the land forever. Neitzer matoi, a branch of my plantings. Maaseh yodai lehispoel, my handiwork in which to take pride. Now, truthfully, this is a Mishnah that doesn't come from Avos. This is a Mishnah that comes from the last perek of Sanhedrin, as everyone knows. So the question is, it's called Chelek. This comes from Sanhedrin. Why do we learn this Mishnah about Olam Habo dafka over here in the beginning of Avos? And the custom is, before you say each perek, those who say a perek every Shabbos, so before they say the perek, they say this Mishnah of Kol Yisroal yesh lehem chelek le'olam habo. Now there are those who say it comes to remind us that every single Yid has a chelek. But why over here dafka? Why not in Sukkah? Why not in Brachas? Seems more appropriate to recite over there. I'd like to suggest as follows, that when it comes to the study of you, of your midas, of your character, it's completely different, the Torah study. All the other systems of midas are opinions that have developed in that century under those circumstances, and their theories, and that, like many theories, they are debunked. At one stage in English history, if you were a mensch, you wouldn't suffer an insult quietly. You had to challenge the fellow to a duel to the death in the morning. That's completely not what the Torah says. That's not how we deal with it. So we start off by saying our study of midas is not just so that you'll have a more pleasant olam hazeh, which certainly a person of good midas, good character, good traits will certainly have a better olam hazeh. It's not hewn from olam hazeh. It's hewn from eternity. Your midas are there to refine you. The challenge of dealing with people is there to refine you because you're a person of eternity. You need to be able to relate to Hashem. You need to bring out a refined character. That's what midas are. They come from olam ha'emes. Another indication that before we learn midas and good behavior, we first say Kol Yisroal yesh lehem chelek le'olam habo, to remind us that olam habo is not about ticking off the boxes. Did malulav, gave my charity. That's very important. But it's mainly about your character, your office. Did you study from the office? Do you have a Masorah? Do you know where your behavior comes from? Did you achieve the tachlis of a refined character, a refined person learning Torah, a refined person doing mitzvahs, a refined person full of chesed? That's the chiefest achievement which I believe that Avinu Moreinu did achieve. And a Yid needs to know, we say before we study about attitudes and behavior in Olam Hazeh, before we study that, we need to know that every Yid is greater than the earth itself. He's greater than the solar system itself. Because the solar system doesn't have a place in Olam Habo. You do. Every Yid yesh le chelek le'olam habo. I'm now going to wrap up and say that Kol Yisroal, you get to Olam Habo not because, not as a solar pilot, not as a solar Torah mitzvahs person. You get there as part of Kol Yisroal. Klal Yisrael are guaranteed a place in Olam HaEmes. As long as you're related to Klal Yisrael, you have a chelek. But the Chaim says everyone's chelek is different. If a person, you should know you're starting out, you've got a massive palace there. But Chas v'Shalom, it's a palace that depends very much on the way you behave day to day. It's dynamic, it's changing. That's why it's called Neitzer Mata'ai, a planting of my hand. Planting, the Chaim said, you learn a little, another Mishnah, one Mishnah. It grew a little. Your plot expanded. Chas v'Shalom, person does something wrong, his plot became a little diminished. There's a dynamic. This world, we're interacting, everything we do, everything we say, everything we think. We're interacting with the Olam HaEmes. Olam HaBa is not that it hasn't been created yet. It's already there. We're busy working on it all the time. We don't want any broken windows over there. We don't want any leaking roofs. Eternity in a leaking roof, the Chaim used to say it's not pleasant, and therefore a person has to remember. Kol Yisroal yesh lehem chelek le'olam habo. When you're working on your midas, your refinement, your decency, your goodness, you have to be aware what you're achieving. You're achieving in Olam HaEmes. You're bigger than the solar system. You're going to last longer than the solar system. You're part of eternity. Kol Yisroal, every single year, as long as he's part of Kol Yisroal, he's got a chelik. He can mess it up, and he can grow it. Person becomes a gadol, means he includes so many more people. His chelik becomes that much greater. I'd like to conclude with the following thought. Yaakov Avinu loy mes. I heard my father say so many times. Yaakov Avinu loy mes. Yaakov never died. The Gemara asked, Saftus Avaya, Kavur Kavraya, did they bury him for naught? Did they give a spade him for naught? Vata, he passed away. But Mazaro b'chaim, Afru b'chaim, he never died. He never passed away, because as long as his Torah is being studied, his legacy is being maintained, he is alive. He is growing from station to station through us, his great, great, great grandchildren. And therefore us, as family, as children, as Talmidim, either directly or indirectly, as admirers of Morenu, Rabbeinu, as we learn a Mishnah, any one Mishnah, Domes, he'll be with us forever. And Bezat Hashem, he was a great davener, and now he'll be even a greater davener. Bezat Hashem, he'll daven for Mommy. Should be spared to her long and good life, a happy life. Daven for all of us, Kinderlach, Talmidim, and he should daven on high, he should beseech on high for the difficult situation that the world finds itself in. Bezrat Hashem, Hashem will say, L'tzaraseinu die. And I thank you so much for joining with us to launch this wonderful base medrash of a Mishnah a week in Pirkei Avos, the holy Mishnah, which is the holy neshama, in honor of Morenu, Avinu, Rabbeinu, Rav Avraham Chaim ben Eliezer Yaakov. Thank you.
Tribute, and I hope you'll do it again next week. Please God, everybody should just join again next week at 7:30 on Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you all. Dov, that was absolutely, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I'm sure Dad will be so proud.
Amen. Thank you. Bye, Chaim.